Good afternoon, wonderful people. We have now gone into part of the graveyard shift, as they like to call it. But you haven't had a lot of time to eat a lot, so I'm really hoping that you are all refreshed and revitalized. So can we get a bit of a thumbs up for everybody that is still fresh and raring to go, because this is going to be a really awesome presentation. Yes, that's what I like to hear. Liesel, look at that. They're raring to go. So we are joined by Liesel de Wet, Head of Accelerated Organizational Sustainability at Unitrans Supply Chain Solutions South Africa. So this is a real passion, this particular topic for Liesel. In fact, her and her colleague Jacques Rief won the best co-speaker award at the SAPEX annual conference for their presentation, the very same one that you're going to be listening to now. So I'm not going to do the formal bio introduction. I'm going to let Liesel do that herself, because everybody has a different opinion on what they'd like to share. But her topic today is the role of culture, operational excellence, and sustainability in creating a purpose-driven business, which I think that all of you can agree is not enough to have. It's an absolute necessity now. So Liesel, thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Tanya. And can you see my screen okay with my slides?
You just need to, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everybody. And it's really, really great to be here and to address you today on this topic. And I'm going to dive straight into purpose. What is purpose? And we look at the dictionary definition. It's the reason for which something is done or created, for which something exists. It's a person's sense of resolve or determination. So the Renaissance era gave birth to the idea of imperial ecology, where humanity's knowledge of science and technology took dominion over the natural world. And this became the predominant strategy throughout the Renaissance era, and later, right through to the 18th and 19th centuries. It was only in the late 19th century, early 20th century, actually, where the modern green movement actually developed. So, boy, we've had quite an incredible time with our macroeconomic climate. And I think we've had pandemics before, but nobody really had a pandemic that actually shut the globe down. And what that actually did do, it gave us a chance to stop and have a look and really see the impact that we actually have on our natural world. And there was a call by countries and governments and actually lots of stakeholders to say, we really had a big impact on the planet, and we need to build back better. We need to build back in a way that we take the environment into consideration. And I'm sure we've all seen the memes that were going around on social media about animals coming back into urban areas, and it was quite heartwarming to see. But what it did do, it gave the Earth a chance to breathe. I mean, scientists saw that the carbon emission levels actually came down to pre-industrial levels, and it also gave sustainability a seat at the boardroom table. So we really had a big impact on the environment. Companies that were looking at their global supply chains had to say, well, how do we service our clients now because of the shutdown of China? It really changed a lot of things, and technology and digitization became forefront. Working conditions absolutely changed completely. I mean, 10 years ago, you spoke about working from home, you'd probably get the hairy eyebrows and not happening. And now it's become the new norm. And the idea of now working flexi time is growing, and businesses are having to communicate differently and treat their staff a little bit differently in this new environment. And of course, I have conflict there, and it has really played havoc with the oil price. And I don't think any of us would have predicted that this would happen. I'm not going to give it too much attention, but it really has definitely impacted our world quite substantially. So if you start looking at sustainable supply chains, one of my favorite graphics from the Gartner report, which talks about sustainability from cause to care in a purpose-driven outcome for a fractured world, they take a new spin on the people, planet, profit look, and they've actually made it, I find this a lot more relatable. So how do you make purpose personal? Very, very important. So it has to be a personal part of your employee's mission. And I think COVID really, really highlighted that, because COVID, we were all like, we're in this together, we've got to get through this, and we've got to support each other to get through this huge, big global pandemic. And it all drove us to do the best that we could. So making purpose personal, that's a great example of that. Pivot to sustainable profit. So as a business, you can't just continue making runaway profit without looking at where your profit comes from. So sustainable profit is exceptionally important and built on a solid foundation of corporate governance. And my favorite one is build value-aligned ecosystem. So who do we partner with? You work in an ecosystem, you don't work in isolation. And partnering with the correct partners to build a value-aligned ecosystem is really, really important. So how does culture change, operational excellence, and of course sustainability all work together to drive a purpose-driven organization? And most importantly, long-term sustainable value creation definitely starts with clarity of purpose. So these next few slides are presented by my colleague Jacques here. So I will try and do my best to give it its just deserves. But it's a little bit about Unitrans. Who are we? What is our purpose, our mission, and our aspiration? So our purpose is, as a trusted service partners, to extend our range of services with existing and future customers to provide them with this focus on growing their core business. Our aspiration is to be recognized as a leading provider of integrated operational services, leveraging our strong contractual base and strategic alliances with our clients. But most importantly, underpinning all of this is we are relentless in pursuit to become the safest and most innovative integrated operational service partner in South Africa. Really, really important. That speaks to underpinning our purpose. So how did we go about tackling this big, audacious goal of changing culture, especially in our business? And I think one of the most important things is taking ownership of the narrative. So understanding what the current environment is, where our staff are, and we've done quite a few client surveys within the business to get a feel for what are the burning issues and platforms that are currently bringing forward within our staff, and just authentically engaging with our employees. I think COVID really, a lot of us are shell-shocked by what happened, and there's actually quite a lot of trauma around that, and looking to leadership to provide guidance, authentic guidance, honest and communication, which really alleviates fears. We may not have all the answers, but we need to continuously talk and engage with each other in order to get them. Emotional awareness is also quite an interesting one. This talks to empathy versus sympathy, and when you're saying hello to someone, you really need to stop and say hello to someone so that they understand that you've taken your time and you're prepared for that answer back. It's not just a casual, how's it, as you're walking up the stairs. So emotional awareness is different for everyone, but it's a very, very important part. Also speaks to respect, being respectful of each other. Communication is, it's key. It's the foundation of everything that we do, and it needs to happen on a regular basis and often. Owning your vulnerability, so understanding that you might not have the answers, but we need to still provide some form of feedback and communication to your business and to your employees. And I think that's really, really important, is owning that vulnerability and saying, I don't know, but let's work together and see how we can find this out. So some of the key learnings of our culture change in pursuing our purpose is aligning our purpose, our outputs and frameworks, making sure that everyone is basically singing off the same hymn sheet and aware of what frameworks we have in place in order to do that. Building purpose into the employee value proposition was also very, very important. And to be the employer of choice. With the influx and the speed of which technology and digitization is happening, we need to start attracting our Gen Z, our emerging generation that's coming through. And that generation is very, very keen on what is it that you are actually doing in making a difference. So that's really, really important for us to be in a position where we can attract and retain our key talent. Sharing the vision in order for getting our employees to be aligned behind our purpose, they have to know what it is and what does it mean to them personally as well as for the business. So it's sharing the vision, where we want to be, our aspiration, and what role each employee plays in order to achieve that. The last point, which I think is very critical, and it's even something for me personally, especially in the climate change space, because as many would say, there is no silver bullet to try and resolve these challenges that we're facing. But, you don't always need to have the right answers, but you still do need to communicate and keep people informed and help them feel inclusive. So at Unitrans, we have a culture of every employee seen, heard, appreciated, and understood. And it's really made such a difference in creating a safe psychological space where employees can engage correctly and where we celebrate forward failures in order to understand, right, how do we move forward with this and what we can do to improve the processes and make them better. So accelerated organizational sustainability sits within operational excellence. And operational excellence is a division in our business that has really evolved over the past 5 years. And it's constantly changing. And it's kind of our excellence hub within the business. And we have we've got 9 subdivisions under that. The first one is centralized operational control. A centralized operational control really looks at it has our control tower. It looks at our drivers. It knows exactly where our trucks are, what routes there are, looks at management such as driver fatigue, speeding, all the rioting that's happening, where our trucks are to make sure everyone's safe, linking very closely to our mission of making sure that we are the safest and most innovative service provider. So our next item there is operational systems development. So I think this is part of communicating authentically, is that we are not system developers, and we've learned that over the years. So we've partnered up with a service provider that helps us, and what they do is they provide interfaces to track the operational revenue-based activities across the business and also communicate with the integrated solutions to provide automated experiences across our various platforms, because we have quite a few. Linking on to that is our operational systems improvement, and Sean refers to them as the nerve bridge. So the OSI team basically look at how do they implement new and existing systems. And if you look at it next door is the continuous business improvement team, which is where all our clever engineers sit. They would take that data and they'll look at building dashboards and improving processes within our business. And it's such an important part of the operational excellence team. Then we have our operational risk management, and these are the guys that go in and really have a look at the community uprising, the strikes, what's happening, the route planning, the nitty-gritty stuff of being a transporter in South Africa, and we've got a really great team there. Next to that is our centralized SHEC services, which is very, very important. And SHEC, it's really key critical to everything we do. Fuel is obviously a very closely managed line item on any balance sheet. And we have a centralized fuel management team of about 3 people, and they look at the entire fuel procurement of our business and manage it centrally, which has really helped with savings, etc. And then definitely not last, I will talk about accelerated organizational sustainability a little bit later, but our new kid on the block is our interdepartmental optimization team, and they're looking at efficiencies across the departments to see where we can collaborate, maybe piggyback, and make sure that everything runs smoothly. So these are just a few linked to safety, just a few of the savings that we've actually managed to achieve as an operational excellence team. Some of them, like speeding, we've noticed a 37% reduction in speeding, a 24% reduction in harsh acceleration and harsh braking. Possible accidents. So people say, well, why are you looking at possible accidents? So they're often technically also sometimes referred to as near-miss accidents. If you manage the root causes of possible accidents, then you definitely start looking at reducing your actual accidents. And that's a really, really important part about with safety in the community, to try and keep that as low as possible. We've reduced our fuel consumption by 2%, critical events by 9%, and we had an excessive idling project that we ran where we reduced our idle time with our fleet, and we had a very incredible success, about 62% reduction in excessive idling. And of course, that also reduces your carbon emissions as well. And expediting events, which means cell phone usage, etc., in cab, 15% reduction in that. So where to from here? So I think, with technology and digitization moving into sort of future space, sort of sci-fi movie type zone, is we're really looking at creating more visibility around our driver behavior analysis. So not just looking at the equipment, but also the driver. How does he drive? How is he performing? Predictive analytics is key critical in this space. And robotic process automation. I mean, people are usually quite nervous when you start talking about robotic process automation, AI, and you start thinking of movies like Terminator, where robots take over the world. But actually, mundane tasks can be really quite easily automated, and that definitely frees up skills to do people to do more in different elements of our business. So that is something that we've just sort of started, and it's very, very new on the block, but we're seeing phenomenal results from that. And we look forward to growing that portfolio a lot more. So in October last year, I got a call from Jacques to say, we need to go green and you need to come help us go green. And I was quite delighted to come on board and help Unitrans become greener than what they were. Some things in place, but we weren't where we needed to be. And we needed to understand, how does this work for our business? How does it slot in? So I'm just going to take you through a little bit around the why and the how. So last year, in November, the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released a report which was actually dubbed Code Red for Humanity. And basically what the report said is that, taking all the global science into consideration, we are definitely heading towards an excessive heating well above the 1.5 degrees that was agreed upon at the Paris Convention about 3 years ago. So human influence has definitely warmed the climate. The report was very, very clear on that. I mean, there is a natural warming that happens, but we have definitely accelerated that. And we're seeing more and more extreme weather events. I mean, the other day I was on NBC News having a look, and I mean, America is in absolute turmoil, from the East Coast right through to the West Coast. I mean, California is burning. The temperatures are 20 degrees higher than they've ever been. We've got 51 degrees on average in many parts of this. We've got Mississippi and Georgia, which is flooding. We've also got the Pakistan floods, which were really, really hectic. So, and that's just in the last month. I mean, closer to home, we had the Durban flooding. So we can see, really now, we can see the impact we've had on the environment, and things are really getting worse and worse and worse. So the cumulative scientific evidence is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. And we have a very, very small margin of improving this. What does it mean for us as supply chain professionals? So our clients are looking to their supply chain partners to help them achieve their sustainability goals and objectives. If you have a look here, this diagram is from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and they've actually identified scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. So scope 1 and 2 are basically what you are responsible for, and many companies already have those bedded down. The scope 3 is really your supply chain emissions. And as you can see, there are many, many stakeholders within a scope 3 emissions environment. And it makes it hard to track and hard to measure, although there are a lot of methodologies and approaches out there. But transport is definitely a material aspect, and therefore one that is under the spotlight. Our customers are demanding visibility and accountability on value chain emissions. And COVID, again, definitely did highlight the impact on our planet, and definitely fueled back the Build Back Better movement. So what are we doing at Unitrans? So we recognize that it's imperative to develop and implement sustainable business practices. We're committed to our environmental, social governance as a strategic priority. So how profits were obtained, part of a just creation of a just society, and also how do we use our resources. And we've just now recently, actually, our whole strategic leadership team has signed a pledge of commitment towards our sustainability journey, because, ladies and gentlemen, we are on a journey. We by no means the best. We are constantly striving to become better at what we do. And I think that's really, really important. I mentioned earlier, there's no silver bullet in this space. There's a lot of interconnectedness. There's a lot of unknowns in terms of there's new technology out there, such as hydrogen and even CNG. We've got some trucks running around, but rolling it out widespread, etc. There's a lot of challenges around that in terms of charging infrastructure, refueling. So there's a lot of these sort of complexities around. That's why it's so important that we work together to try and understand, or at least have the conversation as what is best. And we subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals. And what's really nice about these is that it's often said, and it's rightly so, sustainability is not just about the environment. We also need to look at our people. We need to look at the profits. They're interchangeable. So the Sustainable Development Goals actually touches on all those components. So we've adopted that as our framework. And we have just recently gone through a strategic process where we've identified our top sustainable SDGs and our aspirational SDGs, and what we're going to do to try and improve on those moving forward. And we'll be launching that shortly into the market, as well as with our employees. And we're really, really excited about that. So what is accelerated organizational sustainability within the business? So quite simple. It's really, how do we embed sustainability within the DNA of our culture? That's really, really important. So as I mentioned, this journey started last year, and what we were focusing on is in getting the fundamentals right. What is in, what is out in terms of measurement? Where does the data sit? Who owns the data in the business? What processes are there? How do we link or improve them or make them more efficient? Linked to that also is our vibe indicator. What is the general vibe and feel around sustainability? And thankful to say that it's good vibes only. But a lot of questions are like, I understand what it means to me personally, but what do I do in my current role? How do I contribute towards sustainability and getting our organization to be more sustainable? So it's providing guidance on that, toolkits for the business to empower them, because you can't just go out and say, well, we need to reduce our emissions, and you're not empowering your staff to do that, or your employees to do that. So that's really, really important. Identifying new business opportunities through this opens doors for investment opportunities, definitely increase your brand reputation in the market and market positioning. Except don't get it wrong, because greenwashing for me is on the other side of the no-no spectrum. And companies that do greenwash, really, the NGOs are extreme watchdogs, and you'll get into huge trouble there, and it has a massive impact on your brand reputation. And again, also linked to the desired employee of choice in terms of attracting top talent. So some of the key critical success factors, and I've been very, very lucky in the business and in my role to have executive ownership from Terry and the strategic leadership team. And therefore, it's included in scorecards. It's communicated as such from the business. And it's so, so important to have it communicated top down to employees. Otherwise, you just don't get the buy-in. It has to be embedded in the business strategy. And that's what's so nice to be part of our operational excellence team, is that we all work together to achieve our role of being excellent within the business and making the business excellent and aligning it to our purpose of creating the space for our clients to go and be the best in their environments by taking our product stewardship very, very seriously. And getting this in the business strategy is key critical. Communicated to the company along with tools to realize this. So this is a really, really important point. You can't just communicate and not empower, because that leads to disillusionment. And many people, because climate change and global warming is such a big thing, people get scared and they switch off. They're like, well, if it's going to happen anyway, what the hell? Why must you continue doing this? So it's managing that and also saying, well, this is what you can do in your current role, right from our drivers to our staff that work in our warehouse, to our admin staff. Everybody plays a critical role in realizing this. Systems in place to measure successful initiatives is also very, very critical, but not just successful initiatives. We have this culture of also forward failure. So we have a technical division within our business, and they test all sorts of technologies within our fleet. If we get a fuel additive or something that might assist with reducing our fuel emissions, let's test it. Let's see if it works. Is it applicable or isn't it? If it's not, then we don't use it. If it is, then maybe it can be deployed, and maybe it needs further research or investment. So it's really, really important that you test and you're not scared to go forward and test. So you need to measure the success as well, because you'd have to communicate back to the business. So we launched a waste initiative here at head office, and it's just a small initiative, mainly admin staff. And in 1 month, we saved 36 kilograms of waste to landfill we avoided. And it's important to communicate this to staff. And that's just off 2 bins of recycling bins. So it just shows that there's so much more that we can actually do. But if we don't have the data to communicate back to the staff, then you kind of get lost with your initiatives. Another very, very important factor is your non-financial data needs to be integrated with financial reporting systems. And this talks to that earlier point that I mentioned with that Gartner diagram around pivoting to sustainable profit. The JSC have really launched a very exciting project, and I really would encourage you to go onto the website. They've got phenomenal resources where they've taken all the different standards and disclosure documents, and even a new IFRS sustainability disclosure section, and included that into a South African framework where companies can go in and have a look, and it gives them guidance as to what needs to be reported, etc. It gets messy. We often call it the alphabet soup. I know Shamila pretty well, and she always refers to it as the alphabet soup because there's so many acronyms and so many different codes, and there's IFRS and FTSE for Good and GHG, but they're all aimed at the same thing, is how do you report your financial data with your non-financial data? It's very important to understand how you made your profit. So just some of our key learnings that we learned through this whole process is definitely you have to start with a clear purpose. What is it you want to achieve? That is critical, because if you don't have a purpose, then how do you galvanize the business and get everyone on board with you in order to achieve what you need to? What is missing and what needs to change? So what systems do we have that are working well? What aren't working well? What are the gaps? What would we need to get to close the gaps? So that's also really important. Change management, well, change management is critical, and it's often a component that is not given the seriousness that it needs, because without change management, you're really going to struggle to galvanize your staff and your employees and even your clients to understand what it is you're trying to do. Communicate authentically and ethical leadership for me really work in hand. You communicating ethically is so important. You have to be honest. Don't be scared to share your vulnerability in the space. As I said, we don't always have the answers, but we're willing to work, and we want them. We want to find out what they are, so that as an industry we can move forward. If we have this big target of net zero by 2050 based on a just transition to get there, how are we going to do that? So we need to really get together and work together to achieve these kind of targets. And I think awareness of our role in the ecosystem really talks to that as well. It talks to that earlier point of value-aligned ecosystems. We don't work in isolation of each other. We actually work not only in isolation of each other, but also the environment. We cannot function on a planet that's dysfunctional. So in conclusion, when we look at purpose, it's a journey. You know, you don't climb a mountain in one step from the base camp to the summit. It's a hard journey. There's inclines, there's turns, and one has to take it step by step. But know that, you know, we're not alone, and we need to take everybody with us. And that's why it's so important to have a culture that's behind you, a functioning culture. You've got the tools and the people to make sure that your operational excellence moves forward, and your sustainability, it's underpins everything. As I said earlier, long-term value creation is really underpinned by those 3 topics. So that was me in a nutshell. Tanya, I don't know if there's any questions.
It is very quiet on the Q&A front here. Um, are there any questions for Liesel here at the moment?
I'm seeing some applause, which is really nice.
Yeah, no, I would like to see a lot more applause, actually. It's just a bit quiet there at the
Oh,
moment.
wow, look at that.
There we go. Okay, so if people don't have questions, I have some questions, and I'm just going to hog the time myself while we wait to see if any come in.
Okay,
So,
super.
do you have a couple of like quick, simple ways to start? So, I mean, like you said, it looks like this big mammoth task. So, what could we do that's really easy, cost effective to just really start getting this thing going?
So I think it starts with knowing your profile. That's really, really important. So understand what your baseline is. That's the first thing that I actually did when I started, and it's the most important thing. So you need to know where you are and then where you're going. So understanding your baseline, understanding your business activities, understanding your business systems, how they're aligned, what can you get from them, and also defining your operational boundaries in terms of reporting is also very, very important. You know, it I'm a firm believer of making sure that everyone clearly understands what they need to give you in order to calculate, for example, your company's carbon emissions. So be very clear as to what's in and what's out of scope, because not everything is in scope. If you saw that diagram earlier, you've got your scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. So it could be fuel, electricity. There's different methodologies to calculate those. So it's really important to know which ones are those. And it's not that difficult to do. And there's a lot of resources out there that you can utilize online, freely available actually, to help you calculate that. So I would definitely say understand your profile, understand your base footprint.
Thank you. That's fantastic. That's a good place to start. I do have a question here from Eric. What are simple ways to influence and create a safety culture in a workplace?
Sure, that's quite a good one. Again, it starts with you. So I think making safety personal is exceptionally important. I never forget, I attended a talk not so long ago, and it's a lawyer who presented the talk, and he said, if he had £1,000,000 for every time someone said, if only I did this, if only I did that, he said he'd be very, very wealthy. And it's quite scary, actually. If only I plugged in my seatbelt before I drove off, then I wouldn't have smashed through the windscreen. That type of. So it's really important to communicate properly, to talk about what are the hazards in the workplace, identify them. And I'm a big believer in visual communication. That's just the way I'm programmed. So create the picture. Show, if people don't always read a lot of text, make it easy for them to understand. This is a hazard. Be careful of doing this. And we have a really great driver training program called UniDrive that we train all our drivers. I mean, driver safety is also super critical. And that is training, education, communication is the bedrock of creating a solid safety culture. I hope that answers Eric's question. Sorry, Tanya, I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Oh wow! I think I should be fined for every time I do that now. So I think that Eric, that does answer Eric's question. He has another one. Are there some reads or studies that you could recommend for
On
this?
safety in particular.
I'm assuming yes.
Okay, on safety, I can't really at this moment. I'm more on the sustainability side of things, but OSH Act is a fantastic. The OSH Act really has everything in it, and so I would definitely look at that. Safety culture is a different story because it depends on what your organizational culture is as well. And there are a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do and create. And, I'm sorry, on the top of my head, I can't tell you of a study per se that I can recommend. But there are a lot of businesses out there that do offer those services as well. But I think the most important thing is to understand your culture. And understand what's your business language. Businesses have a language, and that's really, really important. So whatever you do, create, it has to be relatable and it has to be authentic. So that's one advice I can actually give, is use your business language and make sure that it's authentic and that it's easily understood.
Thank you, Liesl. So, are there, I mean, this is a bit of a step out of it, but are there any sort of outreach programs that people could volunteer or help with regards to the sustainability initiative and environmental support? I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. Are there things, I mean, we look at the Clothes for Good activity. Are there other type of things that you know about that just random people could get involved in?
Yes, so I mean, there's quite a lot actually, especially on the waste side. I mean, we've got a big problem with waste in our country. We've actually signed up with a company called Adopt a River, because one of our operations borders on the banks of a river in Durban and Clearwood. And we've signed up with Adopt a River, and what they do is they help look after a section of this river where they bring members of the community that they train to take the waste out of the river and then recycle it. There's also the River Boon project, which is a phenomenal project where it's a simple thing where they put like a floating device on the actual river where it catches all the waste, and then they do the same thing. The community, they empower them to come in there, pull the waste out of the river, and then take it to recycle. Lots of initiatives around that. I'd also encourage you, there's a lot of cleanup initiatives. I know here in the Cape, we've got quite a few beach cleanup initiatives. I tell you, we did a cleanup initiative, and I actually picked up a nappy out of the sea.
Oh no.
Tire in the sea, and straws, and we just did a tour prior to that at Sandcob, and I mean those tours are fantastic, but the damage that this waste does to our wildlife is next level, and it really hurts my heart, but it's so important to be aware of these things. So, and so much household waste ends up in the ocean. And the ocean, we really do need to protect. It not only is it the world's largest carbon sink, but the diverse wildlife that's in there in the ecosystem is really fragile. So it's very important that we look after our oceans. And the war on waste is real. And I would recommend anybody to have a look at that. Also, Food and Trees for Africa have great programs in terms of planting trees in communities, also schools, and they have a dedicated, how would you say, supervisor that will go into the townships and talk to the community and actually say, well, we want to come plant trees here, but you need to look after the trees, and this is how you look after the trees. And they go back regularly and they check. And some communities have, even with fruit trees that have been planted, are now using the fruit to make jam and sell it. So, I mean, those types of initiatives are so important because they create livelihood. We have a huge unemployment problem in this country. So those types of sustainability programs that can actually empower and create employment are key critical. And
Absolutely.
they get involved in those types of initiatives.
Those are some great ones, and I think that we can all look out for those. And I think I'm just going to put it out there now. Shame on anybody here that does not do recycling at home. I started that many years ago. I think my son was in primary school. He was a little one, and he had seen this being done at school, and he demanded that we had all these bins to separate everything. So, I mean, we've been doing it ever since, and we really try very hard to make sure we, put it all out as we can. But I think the big thing here is educating the youth. The little ones need to know.
Absolutely. And South Africa actually performed quite well with recycling because of all the waste pickers. Do you know that the waste pickers are responsible of recycling 80 to 90% of PET plastic in this country? So they provide an incredible service to us. I mean, we're not separating the waste, but they are. And, they're actually forming a waste pickers association. And they'll often say, we don't want to scratch through your rubbish. If you can provide it separate for us, that'll make it so much better. So, I mean, that's just one thing we can all do, in our personal space, is to put all your plastic in one bag and put it out for the waste pickers, because they're performing a phenomenal job actually in our country in terms of recycling PET waste.
No, absolutely, and they're making a living doing it. So again, it serves a purpose on both sides. So there aren't any more questions. Thank you for a really, really insightful presentation on such a really important topic. And I think that it's one of those things you've got to put people in fear to get a response, and people are still not scared enough, I don't think, on this particular
Yeah,
topic.
it's such a fine line, Tanya. The information. I mean, as you know, I've been speaking about this since early 2000s already, and already then we were saying 2020 is a landmark year, and it really was for many reasons. And never did we think we would have a pandemic that'll shut down the globe like it did. And
No.
now that everything's returning back to normal, we're forgetting those lessons, which does concern me, moving forward. And, we really do need to pay attention to this. It's kind of the sleeping giant. There's a lot of other macroeconomic issues, but climate change, really, if you start looking at food security, water restrict, I mean, it really is a scary topic. And I don't want to scare the audience, but I do want to challenge each and every one of you to make a difference. Go out there and make a difference. You'll be surprised how easy it is to make a difference. And if we all collectively make that difference, it's going to be a big difference at the end of the day. And that's really what I would encourage everybody to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Little bits by groups of people makes a big impact. So thank you, Liesl. I think everybody, please go away and take some of this and think about what you can do, in your personal capacity, in your organization, and even in your communities. So, Liesl, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks, everybody.
And a big round of applause. Please, people, big round of applause. Liesl, great job. Thank you so very much
Great.
for
Thank
your support
you.
of Safex.
Great.
Bye-bye for
Always.
now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.